So, in previous talks, we've brushed on the topic, but never really gone into it in depth. So, how could we define what a method is, in the sense that we talk about it, and why is it a problem? Because, I mean, so there's do talk about like the noble method, and sometimes the noble eightfold path is described as like the proper method, the proper practice. But how we define method in the wrong sense, that shouldn't be done.
Yeah, are you asking what is ordinarily seen or conceived as a method, and how is that different from the noble method, which is the Noble Eightfold Path or the Path of Origination as it's described in the sutras?
So, like, what's the difference between just having... you're not improvising, of course, so we're not saying, like, don't do a method means, like, you kind of decide on the spot and you don't have a plan. You just kind of go with the flow or something. But it also doesn't mean that you do that type of method. So where is it that, having, like, an idea about what you should do and a kind of broad guideline, where is it that becomes a method or a technique, the other word that we could use?
Well, one thing would be to, you just go somewhere, ask a question, and then someone gives you something to do, and then you just say, okay, right, I just do that. But then that doesn't imply any type of understanding. You just kind of repeat mechanically the same things, whatever it is, over and over and over again, hoping for a different result, while you actually do the same all the time.
But why is it that a problem? Like, because it could lead to results that people think are useful. Like, it could lead to states of calm, to maybe novel perceptions or experiences, and being able to deal with life better, or whatever people are looking for. So why is it that doesn't apply to the practice? Like, why is it wrong? Even if it's the best, gives you the best benefits and the best kind of quote-unquote spiritual development. Why is it not the same as the spiritual development that the Buddha was teaching?
Yes, that's the question. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I see is that it's just like, okay, I go somewhere, I learn this technique, and then I keep repeating that. But the fact is that I never kind of question myself whether if I kind of... no, it's not quite what I want to say. It's more like... so if my experience is kind of affected by kind of ignorance, whatever I learn comes through this lens in my experience. So if someone teach me something, and I think I understand what he's talking about, this understanding is coming through kind of ignorance and my kind of experience of that. So if, like, the kind of teaching that is given to me doesn't try to highlight the fact that right now you might do this, you might do that, but you have to kind of improve your understanding, well, then there is no hope for me to understand anything, because I kind of assume that I already know, but this knowledge is confined within the fact that I'm ignorant in the first place.
But how would you remedy that situation? Because from that point of view, everything you hear is going to share that characteristic. Like, some instructions might be kind of more superficial, others might be less so, but fundamentally all of it is happening within ignorance, as you said, or is being received by the ignorant framework. So how would you What's the missing element there that wouldn't allow you to develop knowledge, even if you do the right technique that the Buddha himself gave you? You do it for 100 years.
Well, you see, it seems to me that the problem with these methods and techniques is that once you accept them, the method or the technique comes first, and your, let's say, subjective state of mind or intentions come second. That is why the technique remains static, and the assumption is that the technique doesn't change, you just keep applying it, and gradually through time things will begin to unfold, which ties into the ignorance that you were talking about. If being affected by ignorance, you accept a technique as right, then that acceptance and the criteria are part of that ignorance. So you can keep following that, but it will not lead you out of ignorance, except if that technique has as its main characteristic that it shows your subjective state of mind and intentions, and tells you to put that first. But when that is the instruction, that technique can on no account ever become really a technique the way we are now discussing it, because those mind states and intentions are impermanent. They change. So you have to put that first and move with that, which is the reversal of how technique is usually applied. That's why I don't see how ordinarily methods and techniques lead inwards, or let's say out of ignorance.
So that's the thing. So it's not even the content of the technique is bad. It's not like, oh, you did technique number 1, you should have done technique number 2 instead.
Well, that actually also happens. Like, it's not uncommon in certain traditions to have a sense of false progress. Like, you do level 1, and then you fiddle around with that for a few months, and then you can now apply for meditation method technique number 2. And then people can go through that, and then weekend here, initiation there, special transmission here, right, and so on. And then you just keep accumulating slightly different methods and techniques, and you think that is progress, whereas actually it doesn't reveal anything about what is now subjectively for you going on.
Exactly. So but what is that? Why is it important to have that subjective dimension, and what is it more specifically? Because you could also, I mean, from that point of view, people would also argue that no, this is like getting me to understand my own mind. How can you say that it's not teaching me about subjective elements?
Because that state of mind is already there, and so you deciding right now, should I practice meditation method technique number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever you have accumulated in the course of your life, that choice is already coming out of certain intentions and is already affected by certain mind states. But the difficulty is that that's precisely not seen if there is this kind of obsession or almost fetishism with accumulating different methods and techniques. You think,
or even the same one, just even if you don't.
Well, so even if it's wrong, but that's actually already quite uncommon to find somebody who sticks to one method and technique, even if it's still the wrong understanding of method and technique. In a sense, it would be better, I would almost argue, but still, it could still go wrong, basically.
Yeah. Well, if you stick to one, at least you kind of assume you're not like, it's not such a coarse dependence and assumption of your own qualification to decide what is useful and what is not useful. At least you're kind of recognizing, like, okay, if I'm ignorant, how am I supposed to be able to decide when to do this one and when to do the other one? So at the very least, you would stick to one, like as the Buddha did. You stick to one, and then you master it, and then you realize it doesn't lead to the goal, so then you move on. But even then, of course, that's not the right attitude. But the kind of mixing and matching and like cherry picking, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, that's even more inauthentic than just doing one single technique. But so the thing is like, so what is that like what is that kind of subjective element that you mentioned, like more specifically? So you mentioned the intention. So why is that, or let's say how is that properly recognized if not through a technique?
You mean whether intention is wholesome or unwholesome?
Yeah, or whatever the intention is, yeah.
Well, that's precisely the whole point.
Like so let's say going back to what I said before, you scrap the techniques you were doing,
yeah,
and then your technique becomes watching your intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be the right practice?
Well, certainly closer, but that's not your question now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would involve more than just, let's say, in an impersonal way, observing your intentions. Because unwholesome intentions then you shouldn't act out of, to begin with. So that is closer, but you see, now we get into the domain of like precepts and sense restraint, because those precepts, they are in a sense fixed, although one's understanding of them can be refined. But certain things you just shouldn't do, regardless of the situation that you find yourself in. So that is actually, so if people have difficulty totally giving up this idea of methods or techniques, then to stick to observing your precepts would be, in my opinion, closer to a method or technique than what is normally presented as meditation methods and techniques. That's now one thing. But your question then still, like, is it just a matter of observing whether intentions are wholesome or unwholesome? Well, that in and of itself is also already an attitude that you bring. Like, now I'm going to look at my intentions. Like, you could become very suspicious about yourself, or you might have a sort of a background attitude, like I should be on the lookout for something that is unwholesome or that's not supposed to happen, and so on. And that whole attitude can also already be tainted by what's unwholesome. Yeah. So you can't also now make a formula and say, just observe your intentions and then assume that that's always right, because to observe intentions is, from your subjective point of view, that attention is also not always the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, if you turn even the right, I mean, of course, even all these methods that exist today, they originated in some, or were influenced in some way or another by things that are found in the suttas. But the problem is, if you take anything and you make it static, like you said, in that way, then it's just a matter of time until it devolves into something completely different. You might be doing it rightly in the beginning, like asking yourself, if you never question yourself about your intention, and then you suddenly begin doing that, then of course it's gonna kind of point you to that direction, let's say, of where your intentions are.
Which is not wrong.
Exactly. But the problem is that very impulse to make it into like a fixed thing that I can just repeat, that in itself will make it not be right anymore. So the point being, as I said before, it's not even that it's one technique that's wrong and then the other ones are fine. Like, oh, give up body scanning and then watch your intentions instead. The entire attitude of wanting to get a formula for it, wanting to get a recipe for it, that needs to be given up.
Yeah, because you are essentially looking for something which is permanent by holding on to that attitude of wanting a method or a technique. How is that now going to reveal the impermanency of phenomena that the Buddha keeps talking about?
No, well, you might be looking for impermanence, but the thing is, that entire dimension of your experience that actually matters, which is, like you said, the subjective part, which, I mean, it goes hand in hand, because you know that usually the view is like, oh, you need to be perfectly objective. You need to destroy your subjectivity. That's how you get rid of the self.
That's now another problem.
Exactly. So then, by getting into this attitude of, okay, just the object, and completely disregarding even more the whole like shadow of why are you doing this in the first place. There are like, as the Buddha said, actually there's one whole sutta where this Brahmin came to ask, not the Buddha, Venerable Ananda, like, the Blessed One, he was a meditator, and he praised all kinds of meditation.
That's right, yeah.
And then Ananda says, no, he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't praise all kind of meditation. And he said, what's the kind of meditation that he didn't praise? He said it's when someone harboring sensual desire internally meditates, over-meditates, under-meditates, mismeditates, and harboring ill will internally, harboring laziness internally, so all the 5 hindrances. And see, that description there, like, premeditates, over-meditates, under-meditates, mismeditates. The whole point there, it's like, any direction that he goes, it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter whether it's watching your breath, or doing body scanning, or doing noting, or doing mantras, or doing metta, or doing anything under the sun. The problem there is not that. The problem is that he's harboring these things internally. So because he's kind of overlooking that entire dimension and then focusing on what's in front of it. Kind of like, there's actually the same description happens in that sutta with the thoroughbred, like the 2 horses. And it says like the first one just looks at the hay and it just thinks hay, so like just completely absorbed. Actually, literally, like absorption. And then the other one, he actually, what does the horse trainer want me to do today?
Yeah, we did all talk on that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's that direction that cannot be made static. That dimension of that horse asking himself, what does the trainer want me to do today? Obviously, in that example, you could just ask yourself that question every time and you'll be fine. But in this case, the principle of Yoniso Manasikara is something that will tend to kind of, to put it a certain way, like it's going to be like a slippery fish. Most especially if you haven't been sufficiently restrained and keeping the precepts and stuff. So you will get like a sense of it, like, okay, right now I am aware of my intention properly. But the next time you have the same information, the same teaching, the same explanation, and you try to do it again. But now, clearly, it's not working. And so you start to see then that actually even that description that you get, I mean, that's part of the problem with the method. Like, you think that the practice is in that description, like you said before. You just, every time you apply it, as long as it's faithful to the description, it's correct. But if you go this route, you will start to realize actually there isn't even the guarantee that because I remember exactly what the instruction was that I will do it properly next time. Because, like I said, it just slips away from you. Like the intention just, even though it's there because you're not developed sufficiently in authenticity, in sense restraint, and you're used to acting out of pressure, as your default, then everything you do is kind of like to continue with that momentum.
Yeah.
So then, as a result, the possibility of stopping the momentum of acting out becomes more and more unpleasant. So, in other words, you could actually recognize what your intention is at any given time and give it up. But the fact that you carry this momentum with your ignorance and with your unrestrained actions on top of it means that makes it even harder pretty much to look at that direction where the intention is, because it's going to be unpleasant. It means like, oh wait, I've been acting out of greed, aversion, delusion this whole time, and this mind it's like the dog, you've been letting it go there in the same direction for a very good amount of time, and then now it doesn't want to stop because it already caught something, can smell it from who knows how many kilometers away, and now it's just running towards it. And that's basically that's what makes it even harder to attend in that direction of the opposite, let's say, of the counterpart of where your attention is, which is, you could, in the most acute sense, describe it as the intention. It's the sign of the mind that we discussed before.
Yes.
So it's almost like the first point from which you start. Like, let's say you kept the precepts, you took them on, you have been restrained on that external level, and then after that, what do you do? From that first point, what do you do? And the problem is, like, with these techniques and methods, you would assume, like, no, even, I mean, the person wouldn't be aware, of course, but that first point would be tainted, like you said, with various defilements that they're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But then because the stuff that comes afterwards, like the perceptions, the insights, the experiences, whatever it might be, seems to be right or whatever.
Because you think it's a result of your method, so you automatically assume it is progress.
Yeah, but the whole point is, like, it doesn't matter how right that stuff is. The first point from which it comes, or you could say the foundation from which it comes, is that first intention of whatever defilement you were acting out of in the beginning. So it could have been anticipation, craving, aversion, curiosity, even. Like, some people just generally just
give it a try for a little while and
exactly.
see what happens, and they might stick to it. Yeah.
Or curiosity because you want to have these special experiences, and then nothing to do with, like, sense of urgency and freedom from suffering, and those intentions are behind that whole thing that you're doing. Like, imagine you kind of you decided to go somewhere, and in that period of time you're going to have to pass through such and such a place. Well, it's not that the intention to go to that place was there only at that first second when you decided, okay, let me go there. No, that entire journey, doesn't matter how many kilometers you've walked, that intention of you going to such and such a place is with you there. So that entire time, if the intention wasn't wholesome, that entire time, everything you're doing is polluted by that intention. So that's why I meant it's like the first point. And then, you cannot magically, like, fix that, because that first point was where the practice is. Yeah. So if you go wrong there, the whole thing is.
So in a sense, you have to stay there and then go perpendicular, basically more inwards on that first point, rather than now assuming that first point to be right and then start building on top of it.
Yeah. Basically, you extend the analogy. So instead, then you realize, no, it's not about, like, where I'm going to walk, even, because it's not, like I said, you just choose a different direction to walk in.
No, that's not going to be
exactly.
the solution. Yeah.
It's staying at that point where you remain aware of your intentions. That's the place to walk. But see, that walking is, like, it's not. That's not in any of these directions. It's perpendicular, like you said.
Yeah.
So the purpose, precisely, like the knowledge that you're looking for, is not the type of knowledge that's dependent on time.
That's the point. Yeah.
Like, as the sisters would say, like when the monks would, when Mara or whomever would try to tempt them, they would say, like, why do you go after what takes time when you can go after what's presently visible, which is, like, supposedly sensuality? Then they twist it around and say, no, actually what's presently visible is the Dhamma, and sensuality is what takes time. So this whole principle of, like, I do this practice so as to get there, in other words, later in time, that whole principle is in its nature,
Wrong.
it's wrong. Even if what you get to seems to be right.
It's exactly what sensuality is.
Yeah, you work for this achievement, basically. So of course, like enlightenment is an achievement. Like it is something you have to work for. It's not that like, oh, there's nothing to attain or something. But like as we said, it's not progress north, south, east, or west. It's up. So it's in a completely different direction than everywhere else that you would go. In a completely different plane.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Like even geometrically, like up wouldn't suffice.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a sutta which talk about this spacewalker who wants to find the end of the universe, but you're not going to find the end of the universe that way.
By walking. Yeah. Well, yeah. You could even say it's not even like up or down either. It's like a fourth dimension.
In a sense, you could say that.
Yeah.
But that's that might need some qualification. But based on what we've said so far, that would indeed be correct.
Exactly.
So it's a vantage point that puts basically your whole experience in perspective, which is perpetually available. But the moment you stray from that by assuming that all of this is not good enough and you should be somewhere else or it should be different, that's when you lose it.
And that is the always another characteristic if you're doing a technique. It's you're doing it always with that implication of like what I'm going to get from it. Always doing it with that implication of like the emphasizing like the result that's going to come, because you don't see, like if you saw that the giving up of craving and purification of the mind lies in the present, why would you do the technique? It would make no sense. It's like if I'm already where I need to be, why would I just hop on a car and then start driving somewhere?
Yeah, so if out of ignorance somebody accepts a certain direction where their method or techniques takes them, and then based on that they become inspired and start to practice. Now then either most people don't have enough discipline, so they're already halfway through cancers and start doing something else. That's what happens. But if somebody is a bit more diligent, they might stay on that track. But even if they do then, let's say, for the sake of hypothesis, attain that result that from the beginning they were after, the only thing they actually attain is their own ignorance, because their acceptance of that result was fully tainted by their ignorance.
Well, it's
in other words, they just keep going around in circles.
Actually that's a good that image of this Rohitasa, the one who was running to the end of the world, and never actually got there.
No,
that's that's a good image for exactly what happens when you're chasing this knowledge that comes from like later. You're always gonna be able to get more perceptions, more insights, more in depth, focus on it even more, and get even more detailed understanding of it.
And people can build a whole life around that, to the point that ironically they sit still for 10 hours a day because they have this attitude of wanting to get something. So they're still running mentally, even though their whole environment is fixed, quiet, forest, precepts, monk, sit on my cushion. They don't understand that attitude, they will be running.
And it's also it does tend to tie in with the fact that if you have been unrestrained in your life, as people usually are, then almost anything will kind of take you in the opposite direction. So almost anything you do, you just sit down, and just the fact that you're no longer engaging in those things that you used to do that were unwholesome is going to make you calmer, is going to make you like feel better, whatever. But see, if you don't see that the principle and the reason why it is making you feel better is fundamentally because of the sickness that you had, or the like you feel better because you were under a burden that you yourself were creating.
Like your unwholesome actions.
Exactly. Yeah. Then you will think, oh, it's the technique that's helping you with this.
Yeah, that's now the other thing. Like for most people, taking up a method or technique will be motivated by living a very busy and somewhat chaotic life and just wanting to feel a bit more calm, which is understandable, but then from the point of view of the actual Buddhist teaching, why did the Buddha never even teach any meditation to lay people in the way that people now conceive meditation? Because
not at all, really.
Yeah, or not at all, really. Yeah, well, we could come to that later now, but because suppose he would have been teaching some method or technique with the aim of calming people's busy lives, then you might say, well, that would be compassionate. But actually, it's not, because it doesn't address the root of the issue. Like if on account of unwholesome actions, you keep stirring up your own mind, then you can learn a method or technique to in the evening calm down again. If then the next morning you keep stirring it up, that doesn't go anywhere.
And never address why.
So if somebody then teaches a technique that doesn't address the origin of the problem, then you would actively blind people from seeing what now the origin of the problem is, precisely because they're now become fascinated with that technique and staying calm.
Just giving them a painkiller so that then don't feel the need to fix the...
Yeah, and then you die from a terminal illness.
Yeah.
So it would be better to not do that, to directly diagnose the symptoms and then say, well, if you want to have always a calm mind, which doesn't need any maintenance on your part, don't act in such a way that keeps stirring up your own mind because you just shoot your own foot. That's the reason why there's always this emphasis on virtue and on sense restraint and seclusion. That is not because the Buddha hadn't yet discovered some sort of meditation method and technique, because if you emphasize that side, or even if you say anything along those lines without actually revealing the origin of the problem, then you would be leading people astray. And that is ironically what I think we see basically everywhere these days.
Yeah, it's more entertaining, for sure. It's more entertaining to just dance around the problem in infinite array of ways than to actually look at it in the face and see, oh, this is what it is. And I mean, factually, in the same way that yes, it could calm you down, depending on the technique, I guess, but it could show you some, like you could circumstantially have, due to no longer being as distracted by, worldly things and breaking precepts and stuff, it may give you a better or closer recognition of, let's say, your intentions for a bit. But because you emphasize the technique part, you don't stay on that point where you could have actually developed that awareness of the stuff that matters. You think it's the technique then. You again, like I said before, you keep the emphasis in the wrong place. So it actually takes you now away from that middle ground where you could have just pulled back from the engagement with the world, but without then falling into another internal kind of activity.
That you need to keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So pulling back from stuff. So in that sense, it wouldn't even be the technique itself. It would just be the fact that it would force you to kind of withdraw, to stop engaging with things in the world, and that in itself could be the basis for the right practice, but you need to keep it there and not then start running in a different direction.
Yeah.